Yo, Beth. That shit crazy.
Welcome, everybody, to All Even Live exclusive. I am Barry Grant Jr., host of the All Even podcast. To my left is Mike Guido, host of Guido's Gridiron Blitz. Down on the bottom is Matt, the great Cataruzolo. And who we have on the show today is the editor-in-chief of Blogging the Boys, RJ Ochoa. Welcome to the show, my man.
What's going on, guys? Appreciate you having me. Hope you've had a good week and you're ready for the weekend.
Absolutely. So, we just want to, ask you how your family's doing in this interesting time that we're living in right now.
Yeah, all's well, thank God. Just kind of taking it day by day. We're chatting. I'm not sure when this goes out, but on the 1-year anniversary of the NBA season getting suspended. I'm a big golf fan, so watching the Players, which was canceled after the first round last year, it is just a really weird time. It feels like yesterday and like 10 years ago all at once. So I don't know. It's strange. Every day has been strange for a long time, as I think we all agree.
Yeah, definitely. So RJ, Dak, go.
I mean, it's been a fun week, honestly, and it was unexpected. I think, at least for me, I really thought the Cowboys were going to botch this to the point. I thought a deal would get done, but I thought it would maybe take till May or June. I thought they'd flirt with the franchise tag true deadline of July 15th much more. I've talked a little bit and written a little bit about how I think it would be in their best interest to get this done as soon as possible, just so that this isn't hanging over them in entering free agency. And so, in that respect, I really am impressed. I think that Dak won. I mean, if you're choosing a winner, I think that Dak won financially. I think the Cowboys win and that they get a top 5 quarterback for the next 4 years. And I think that that's always a good thing. I think you're ultimately glad that you paid the price, but it's over. I mean, it is such a really peaceful feeling to know that we don't have to speculate anymore. On Wednesday, Russell Wilson tweeted a photo and he was wearing like a gray shirt and like a blue workout mask. And if this hadn't happened, I would be, tweeting things like, well, he picked Cowboys colors. What does this mean? And so it's really nice to be distanced from that in a very, 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 very strong way.
Yeah, it's interesting the way that this whole thing played out, because you got the feeling that the entire process is that Dak was pushing and pushing and pushing for everything that he wanted, and Jerry Jones was not budging. That's why we were getting, this big stalemate on negotiations. And it turns out, it feels like that Jerry just gave Dak everything he wanted, right? I mean, do you get the feeling, RJ, that Dak Prescott just kind of played Jerry like a fiddle? I mean, Jerry admitted that he got played like a fiddle a little bit.
Yeah, I think, Dak said in his press conference that he all along has been trying to control the things that he could control. And I think that of the things he could control, he won. And I think beyond that, I think that there has been so much narrative that has worked against the Cowboys for the last 2 years now. I mean, it's honestly too much to go through, all of it. But I mean, the fact that they paid, 2 low priority positions and an off the ball linebacker and Jalen Smith and a running back in Ezekiel Elliott. The fact that Dak is the unquestioned leader of their team, the fact that they were terrible, in a football sense, just a football sense when he got hurt this past season. I think people forget this. A week after he got hurt, there was the report about, discourse between the defensive players and the defensive coaching staff. And that never happens with Dak Prescott in the building. And so, I mean, these things just kind of continue to happen like day by day, like week by week, that worked against them. The fact that the salary cap shrunk. I mean, obviously nobody predicted the global pandemic, but I mean, that worked against the franchise tag value. If the salary cap had risen like it normally does, I mean, I don't know that I believe that they would have been less inclined to get this done, but it wouldn't have been as big of a penalty to them if they hadn't. And so, I mean, Dak did everything right, and then everything around him went right. And so it really just painted the Cowboys into a corner they couldn't get out of.
Yeah, RJ, it's super interesting analyzing what NFC East teams in particular had to deal with going into this offseason. I mean, in just respect to the Cowboys, they weren't sure what was going to happen with the whole Prescott situation. And then once he secured the bag that we all predicted that he might have, this gives them most likely the most stable quarterback situation in the entire division. I mean, full disclosure, I'm a Giants fan here, so this is going to be a little bit uncomfortable for me to try to dissect as we go through this. But after this year, Daniel Jones, if he doesn't produce and that offense is not at least a little bit better than last year, they could be looking in a different direction. Philadelphia hasn't fully committed to Jalen Hurts. There's speculations that they could look at a quarterback in the draft. Washington is most likely not going to roll with Taylor Heineke in the long run. So what does this contract situation with Dak, now that they've answered their biggest question in the offseason, how much confidence does this instill in you that they could take advantage of a very weak division?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it says that they're finally taking that seriously. And I think that they've played, I think you would agree with this. The NFC East is really bad now. And I think it became really obvious how really bad it was nationally this past season, but it's been really bad. I mean, outside of the 2017 Philadelphia Eagles team that won the Super Bowl, I mean, this has generally just kind of been, a two-team race every year. The Giants and Washington have kind of just been floundering for a while. And really since 2016, since the Dak and Wentz era, it was just kind of back and forth. But even before that, Washington's 2 division titles in recent memory, not to make everything about the Cowboys, but have come in seasons where the Cowboys lost their quarterback for most of it. This past year, and then in 2015 when Tony Romo missed 12 games. And so, I mean, not that the Cowboys are the center of it all, but they really have the most talent. I don't think they had the best coach under Jason Garrett. And I think now that is just kind of a wash all the way around. We'll see how Mike McCarthy performs. But I think to extend your point, I think that, they finally realized, getting to a Super Bowl is difficult. And at the end of the day, it's the NFL and weird crap happens. But I do think that this is the path of least resistance that they've had in a long time, not just within the division, but beyond that there are now 3 wild card spots. And beyond that, they play in the weaker conference. I think we would all agree, because in the AFC, you've got Kansas City, you've got Buffalo, Baltimore, Tennessee, Cleveland, Pittsburgh if they're back, Indianapolis if Carson Wentz is legitimate, New England if they find a way to obviously get their own quarterback situation, Miami. Whereas in the NFC, I mean, you're dealing with Tampa Bay, and I think, most data would suggest that there will be some sort of regression there. You've got Green Bay, and I think that there's regression on the horizon there as well. Seattle's obviously fallen off, and who knows what the Russell Wilson situation ultimately yields. So your true competition are the Bucs, the Packers, the Rams, if you believe in them. The Cardinals are a little bit on the up and up, but ultimately, I mean, even that, I mean, the path that I don't want to take anything away from Tampa, but the path that they took, they beat the NFC East winner, right, in the wild card round. Then they drew the Saints, and all respect to Drew Brees, not exactly a formidable foe this past season. I mean, so they really had 2 games. So if you can put yourself in position where you got to win 2 games to win a world championship, I mean, I think the Cowboys finally realized that they're not that they're that close, but that it's not as impossible as it is for other teams right now.
That's a great way to kind of segue into my question, because Dak Prescott's, the contract, dispute is over. We can be able to move on and think about long-term how this roster can be able to be filled out. Dak Prescott has a $22 million cap hit for this year. And that gives the Cowboys a little bit more flexibility in regards to what they can be able to do to kind of add to this team defensively. We have trouble in our secondary, still need some safeties. After this, or better yet, this year, do you feel like it's all about this year for the Cowboys? Because Dak's cap hit kind of increases exponentially over the next 3 seasons after this. So do you honestly feel that they're trying to go for it now and then figure it out after next season? What are your thoughts about that exactly?
I think it's certainly easier, right? It will undeniably get harder, especially to your point. You won't have a $22.2 million cap hit for Dak Prescott next season. And what's more is, the Cowboys, after Dak Prescott's contract extension press conference, or new contract press conference, announced the restructures to Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, and Lyle Collins' deal. They did not restructure Amari Cooper's deal. They haven't yet. Now, as it stands, without restructuring, they can get out of that deal next year at a relatively cost-free amount. They would only have to absorb $6 million against their salary cap. And so that coincides with Michael Gallup being a free agent and his contract expiring. And so I wrote something, it isn't out yet, so it should be, I think, probably about Friday at bloggingtheboys.com. I do think that they probably, purposely waited on Amari to give themselves an out next year and kind of decide, who do we want? Do we want to keep Amari and let Michael Gallup walk, or extend Gallup, maybe trade if anybody wants Amari, or just cut them all entirely? And so in that sense, I mean, it's easier now, right? There's no question it's easier. And I think that we all think their skill players offensively are among the best in the NFL as a total ensemble. I think also the fact that their division is weaker. I mean, at some point the division will bounce back. I mean, Washington has already kind of bounced back, and so it will get harder. I don't know that I think they'll win now, but I do think they have. I hate like the term window because I think it gets overused, but I mean, Kellen Moore got a 3-year deal when he was extended right before the season ended. Dan Quinn got a 3-year deal. Dak Prescott's now on a 4-year deal. CeeDee Lamb, that 3-year deal would coincide with the ending of his 5th-year option when that ultimately eventually gets picked up. And so I do think that they are operating in this, again, I hate that term, but this window of sorts, and their defense just has to kind of come up to par. It'll be fascinating to see if they pick up Leighton Vander Esch's 5th-year option this offseason. But that, and at that point too, you're going to have to make a decision on Trayvon Diggs. Like all these things happen so fast that I think this is their best time. The division is down. And what's more than that, to get to the conference thing again, yeah, right now the Buccaneers and Packers are among your heavier competitors within the conference. But if we live in that 3-year window, I mean, I don't want to be the next dude to doubt Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, but some sense of logic suggests that maybe they'll be out of the picture. And so at some point in that 3-year window, if you're not the second or third best team in the conference, you will be in all likelihood. And so I do think that is their general area sort of and room for error.
$40 million for a quarterback's a lot of money, RJ. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, just based on history. I mean, that's none of these teams have long-term success after paying a quarterback this much money. Like the Chiefs already, and Patrick Mahomes' money hasn't even kicked in yet. And they just cut their 2 starting tackles. I mean, that offensive line next year in Kansas City is going to be terrible. So do you see where I'm going with this? Like, it's a lot of money, man.
I totally do. And like, there are people that say, the salary cap isn't real. And like, it's not like fake. Like, it's not, like Hogwarts. Like, it's a real thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just this like completely made up thing. Right. But it isn't this like, ball and chain that people act like it is either. And so like to the point, to that point, look at the New Orleans Saints, right? Like they've been up against the cap forever and they still managed to place the franchise tag on Marcus Williams. So I also think that the Chiefs example is interesting because I don't, I mean, to be cold, I mean, Eric Fisher is facing a long recovery. Like maybe they don't want to deal with that, it might be about more than the financial element of it to Kansas City, which is just the business of the NFL. And I agree with you. It's a lot of money. It's an inordinate amount of money. It's an absurd amount of money. But there's a fork in the road. You can either be the team that pays a quarterback a lot of money and then tries to figure it out, or you can wander in the wilderness forever. And this is the far more preferable option to me. And to get back to that window talk, like if you look at the life of the contract, 4 years, and if I told you, as Mike, it's your job, you have to come up with the best possible path to the Super Bowl for the Cowboys within the next 4 years, starting this offseason. What's your first move? I don't know how you can devise a path that doesn't include Dak Prescott as your quarterback. Like there's no flawless or perfect or, infallible path, but this is the best one. And it is a game of luck. It's a game of weird stuff. It's a game that obviously last year was played in extreme circumstances as well. And so all that being said, I think that this is just, it's the least crappy option. Not that I think it's a crappy one in general, but it's tough. And at some point, everything comes home, to your point about Kansas City, but I would still take this 100 out of 100 times.
Matt, before you ask your question, I want to throw this out there also, because we talk about this all the time on this show. Barry and I talk about it on All Even Live all the time. If the Cowboys were, for instance, to just let Dak walk, right? They let him hit the market. In your mind, do you think he would have gotten $40 million elsewhere?
Probably. But even if he didn't, like, even if he got $20 million elsewhere, the most important thing to me is that the word elsewhere is in that sentence, right? Like if he's elsewhere, what do I have? Like right now, the Cowboys have Ben DiNucci. And so, and the other thing is like, and this kind of goes to the like non-controllable things that work to Dak's benefit. The Cowboys have a top 10 pick. Like in how many instances do you get a top 10 pick? And they're on the, very end of that margin, I realize, but how often do you get that to help your team that, you really need at a different position that isn't the quarterback position? And so, I mean, it didn't pigeonhole them, but it almost forced them into the way that they kind of had to go this route. It just so happens that this is a really nice route as well. It's like when you buy, I mean, I've never like been in this moment, but like at some point, when you become a parent or whatever, and you're like, man, this like SUV isn't the coolest car. Like there are way cooler cars out there, and I'm gonna look a little, like daddish or momish in this like SUV or this van or whatever. But then you're like, well, it gets really great mileage, and like the airbags are like among the best in the business, and it's got Bluetooth, and it's got seat warmers, and it like it makes sense. So it's not just that it makes sense and you can't deal with it. It makes sense and it's really comfortable.
It's good that you brought up the draft, RJ. It's a perfect segue into my question. So the original draft strategy I had the Cowboys going was offensive line. Now, given the fact that their defense was putrid last year, is bottom 10 in the league, they, in addition to solving the Dak contract issue, they've also restructured the contracts of Tyron Smith, Zach Martin, Lyle Collins. That created about $17 million and gets them also under the cap. So I guess my question to you is there now any changes to what you may have assumed their draft strategy was? I mean, do they now have to go all in on defense with a selection like a Caleb Farley or maybe a Patrick Surtain? I mean, they have to go defense with the 10th overall pick, right?
I mean, I don't disagree generally. Like I will sleep the best, that night if they have helped their defense. But I mean, if they had gone into the draft last year with that strategy, and it was certainly fair of them to consider that, they would have taken Caleb on Chase on over CeeDee Lamb. And so, like that idea, that philosophy has a lot of pros, but it has those very, very specific cons. And that's one example. But their tackle depth they're in an interesting spot because they do have both Brandon Knight and Terrence Steele that played most of the season for them. They're both not great players. They're both still young. So they do have depth that has experience. But obviously, I think a perfect world is that some combination of Rashawn Slater, Penei Sewell, you mentioned the two corners, maybe even Micah Parsons are all there. I mean, trading back, I think they already have 10 picks thanks to the compensatory picks that they got on Wednesday. And so getting more capital, even future capital, because that's more important now than ever, because now you have this big Dak contract on the books. You're going to need these cheap rookie contracts to kind of supplement the rest of your roster. Yeah, I mean, if I have to pick right now, if I had to pick among those guys, I'm probably taking Patrick Surtain. Just that's the mood I'm in here in the middle of March. But I do think the other thing is now that it would have been terrifying for them to go into the draft without this Dak situation figured out, because I don't know, say Trey Lance falls or whoever. I mean, you have to think about that. You have to think long and hard because you don't have a quarterback locked up for the future. So that's another ideal situation, is that whoever it is, QBX falls and the Chicago Bears want to come up, or somebody wants to come up because they're the desperate team. You now, in locking up Dak Prescott, established a whole treasure chest worth of options that you didn't have a week ago.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on the Patrick Surtain thing. We got to get him at 10. If we're going to stay 10, that has to be the pick. I guess my last Dak question for you is that Jerry at the press conference, Jerry he is a funny man, and he will be as honest as he possibly can be, and sometimes even to a fault, right? Where he says that, when he bought the Cowboys, everybody said that it was a bad investment, and look now. So, every time he overpays for something, it kind of works out. So, a lot of people saying that it was a shot at Dak, that, he knew that he lost this negotiation. Do you think that there's still some type of animosity there? Not even really like bad blood, but more on a competitive level between Jerry and Dak? Because, Dak I think he's done a great job of separating himself from Jerry. And because, Jerry likes to be very personal with his players, Dak has kind of kept them at a distance because he knew that this day would come. Do you think that there's still some, kind of some posturing there between the two?
I think first off, it's an interesting observation that Dak has been a little bit different. And I know this wasn't Jerry Jones. Well, I mean, Tony Romo and Jason Witten vacationed with the Joneses, and Romo and Witten and DeMarco Murray went to the Duke, UNC game with Jason Garrett.
Right.
Like there was this sense of nepotism's a heavy word, but sense of nepotism within the Cowboys culture prior to this era. And I think that was a bad thing. And I think that that's part of the reason why, Jason Witten, you want to unretire and come play for us? Cool. Like that wouldn't fly in most NFL organizations. I don't know that I buy that it was, and I know you're not like, oh, there's animosity, but honestly, what I think it was, because the press conference went like almost 2 hours, and this was the first in-person Cowboys press conference since they introduced Mike McCarthy to be their head coach because of the world that we're living in. And Jerry, while he does do 2 radio hits every week on 105.3 The Fan, I mean, this was his first opportunity to chat in front of a live audience. And so I think he was just feeling it. Like, honestly, I think he was just enjoying it. Like, you know, that moment when it's like 11:30 at night, and, you know, on a Friday night, and your face is getting warm. Like,
right.
that to me, it just kind of felt like that. And
Yeah.
I think it was just celebratory and fun and little jabs. And I think within the context of it all, because I also think it's a little awkward, right? Like, we're going to give you, you know, $126 million to work for us. Like, that's an awkward thing in its own self. So I think it was just kind of, it's the caricature of it all. It's the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Jerry loves press. We know that. Jerry loves I think he genuinely loves owning an NFL team and everything that comes with it. I just genuinely think that. And that kind of ties into when they drafted CeeDee Lamb last year. They didn't need a wide receiver, but you saw the smile on his face, and that was one of those picks where he could just like, oh yeah, we got this guy. We're gonna score 150,000 touchdowns this year. Like, just unbelievable. If Kyle Pitts is sitting there at number 10, do you think that Jerry would entertain it?
I mean, there's logic to that. Like, it's not this like
they need a tight end, man. That's not out of the question.
Yeah, like there's a sense of logic, because it is highly possible that he is the best player on your board. And so, I mean, and say Patrick Surtain is gone, whatever, like, and it comes down to like Caleb Farley or Kyle Pitts. Like, I'm not the biggest like film dude. There are dudes that are so much better at that than I am. But like, from everyone I trust and understand, like, it is far more likely that Kyle Pitts is a Hall of Famer than Caleb Farley. And so like, that's like the break point for me. And so I think that great teams find ways to make great talent work. And I think it would look like indulgence, and it would look, you know, like craziness, and in a beautiful way it would be, right? Like, it would just be kind of, you know, like that 11:30 moment, like having another, right? Like, sometimes that's just what you need, and you just dive into it. And to me, it's kind of like, you know, when you look at like optical illusions, and you have to like kind of like lose your vision, you know what I mean? Like, you have to like unfocus, like it would be that. And sometimes that's what you really need to see it all. It's just, to that point though, it really reinforces how important it is for them to be aggressive in free agency and filling the defensive side of the ball, so that if that does happen, you do have that freedom. You can take Kyle Pitts because you don't only have 2 cornerbacks on your roster or something like that. I think that that's the worst way to go about it.
God, could you imagine?
Oh,
like, somebody, awesome. RJ,
now you put it in my head.
Be open every play.
Now you put it in my head, Mike.
If you're going in with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, and Kyle Pitts, all catching passes, I mean, how many plays are you going to get a season where not one of them is open on a single play?
I think
it's insane.
To that point, like when they drafted CeeDee, there was all this conversation about they need to never abandon 11 personnel because they don't need to take one of the wide receivers off the field. Well, I mean, Kyle Pitts lets you operate more out of 12. I think even now you can operate more out of 12 with Dalton Schultz's emergence last year. So like, he does, you know, he unlocks something for you, which is, it's more than just like another body. It is a whole different sector of offense that allows you to be creative. And for Kellen Moore, I mean, that'd be a lot of fun. I mean, and I should mention, as a fighting Texas Aggie, that Kyle Pitts' Gators lost to my Aggies. So, I mean, that's an important thing to know. So,
yeah, had to throw that in there, I see.
I can't think of a more cringeworthy image than Kyle Pitts with a star on his helmet, but that kind of leads me into my next question. So kind of extending upon what Mike said before, with attractive players being there at Dallas's selection, Dallas's philosophy for so long was drafting offensive line, and they built that into such a sustainable unit for so many years. It's why they had the best line in football for the better part of a decade. Do you think that with the indulgent picks of CeeDee Lamb in recent years, do you think they're starting to move away from drafting for need and then kind of picking the more sensational best player on the board? Are they sort of moving away, maybe changing draft strategies as time kind of moves forward?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that incidentally started near the tail end of that. I mean, in 2014, they took Zach Martin, and he was like a top 5 player in that class, and they took him. I mean, because he fell. And I know that there were people, thinking about Johnny Manziel there, another great chapter in Texas A&M football, obviously. But I mean, that was the true. It wasn't as sexy or as flashy as a wide receiver like CeeDee Lamb, but it really was the best player available to them. And so I do think that they've gotten away from that at times, and I think. People love to say like, oh, they smashed their first round picks out of the park. And that used to be true. But, in 2016, they had a top 5 pick. They took a running back, and Zeke is awesome. But I mean, it was still a running back. In 2017, they passed on TJ Watt and took Taco Charlton. In 2018, they told the whole world that they were going to draft Leighton Vander Esch, and they did, despite all the medical concerns. And, they could have gone a number of directions there, but that hasn't exactly worked out. Obviously, in 2019, they didn't have a first-round pick. But even then, I mean, it was very telegraphed that they wanted Tristan Hill. They didn't want Taylor Rapp. They didn't want Juan Thornhill. They wanted Tristan Hill. And to be fair, Tristan looked somewhat promising before he got hurt this past season. And obviously, CeeDee Lamb. But, I mean, the last 5 years, they've sort of not whiffed, but, like, it is not the same level of success that they've had because they have heavily telegraphed things. I mean, last year was the 3rd year in a row. They were going to take Leighton Vander Esch in 18. They were going to take Tristan Hill with their first pick, which was in the 2nd round in 19, and they were going to take Caleb on Chase on last year. And I personally believe that if Jason Garrett were around, I mean, if they hadn't committed to this change, they would have taken Caleb on Chase. But because of the change in disposition, they really, that whole draft class last year was just kind of a who's the best player on the board. And that's why, everybody was so in love with it at the end of it. And, sometimes that works out in a subtle way like Zach Martin, but sometimes it works out in a really big way like CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, definitely. Now, RJ, my next question is a 2-part question. Jalen Smith last year looked lost. Like on every part of the ball. Like I didn't think that his awareness defensively was that poor, or maybe it was masked the years before. But are you concerned about Jalen Smith?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really concerned. And I think, I talked about the disposition of nepotism or favoritism that has existed within the Cowboys for so long. And he's like a bright, shining example of it because he's not a great option. Like he hurts you when he's on the field, but he plays because he's got the big contract. He is a captain. He
got a great story.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like he plays because he's on the cover of the program, so to speak. And so those things, I mean, I don't think the Cowboys do him favors. And I think that's not fair to Jalen. Even, on Wednesday, Stephen Jones talking about, so we have a lot of great defensive talent and, mentioned Jalen Smith. And I think everybody was in too good of a mood to, kind of be bothered by that. But That's the thing. Like you can't tell these people that he's playing really well when he's not. And I think the problem that really rubs people the wrong way, like on Twitter and places like that, is that Jalen, you mentioned awareness, like you used that word specifically. He has like none. And in a weird way, I admire that. Like I admire that he's able to just kind of do him and live his life and be content, because that's a hard level of inner peace to achieve in life in general. But I mean, like his quote at the end of the season where he was like flabbergasted that, the idea of cutting him would come up, and, he challenged reporters to watch the film and things like that. And so it's a tough one. And I don't like, nobody roots for players to get cut, but I thought that cutting him would have signaled, okay, we're not about that anymore. But maybe they do believe that Dan Quinn can get to him.
Definitely. And then, the last part of my question would be, do you think that Aldon Smith is a priority to bring back?
Honestly, no. I mean, Aldon has been a great story himself in terms of returning to football. And I think it's amazing that he did. And I do think the Cowboys should have traded him when they had an opportunity to do so, because, I mean, they were truly playing with house money at that point. And then he just kind of, he was never going to return after 5 years and get 20 sacks. And so I think that they were loyal in that sense, and good for them. But the Cowboys have obviously got DeMarcus Lawrence on the edge. They've got Randy Gregory, who they're kind of banking on. And I'm a big fan of Bradley Anae. He didn't really get a lot of opportunities last year. So maybe
very
that's
aggressive.
My hope is that there's a plan in store for him this season. But as great as Aldon was at times this past year, I think, I wouldn't say it's a priority. If it happens, I think that's okay. But I think that there are other decisions that have to be made ahead of that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I look at the Cowboys roster and I just keep thinking, like, how is this such a problem? Like we talk about it all the time. Like, and it's not like, and RJ, you probably know this as much as anybody does. I mean, you look at the names on this defensive roster, and it's not like we're playing with scrubs, right? Like DeMarcus Lawrence, I mean, he's the most expensive guy on our team right now. He's got a $25 million cap hit next year. And the guy had what, 5 sacks last year or something like, what's the deal? Honest question. What's the problem?
I'm a big fan of Tank, and I know sack numbers are important, but I think he's worth the cost. I have zero qualms about that. But and to your point though, like, you know, I think it's easy to say, well, they've invested so much on offense, but they really have invested a lot on defense too. Like Tank Lawrence is a 2nd-round pick they traded up for, got a second contract. Randy Gregory, 2nd-round pick. Tristan Hill, 2nd-round pick. Jalen Smith, 2nd-round pick. Got a second contract. Leighton Vander Esch, 1st-round pick. Sean Lee, 2nd-round pick. Chidobe Awuzie, 2nd-round pick. Jordan Lewis, 3rd-round pick. I mean, like, they're devoting, you know, people think like, oh, they're throwing out scrubs. They're throwing out like undrafted free agents. Like, that's not the case. They're just missing. And the reason they're missing is because they take chances with these picks. I mean, DeMarcus Lawrence had issues at Boise State, and that worked out. Randy Gregory, you know, on the way to seemingly working out, but didn't for a long time. Jalen Smith, you know, I'm fine. If you want to throw some Hail Marys and buy some lotto tickets in the 6th round, nobody has a problem with that. But like Jalen Smith was the 34th overall pick. Like that's not the time to do that. Leighton Vander Esch was like damaged goods, not the right way to put it, but he had questions about him. And so like it's time to go get the blue chip, no problems. Everybody loves him. His middle school science teacher like still swears by him type of guys, because those are the ones they're passing over in hopes of catching fire, and they just keep failing. And so, but beyond that, I think they're also, you know, they're just not that great. I mean, you know, they're talented in like the grand scheme of life and like general human beings, but they're just not that talented. There's a handful of talent there. And I think if everything works well for them, if the plan is not at all impacted, they can be an all right defense. But it's the NFL. Like the plan goes out the window, you know, on your second series.
I remember when the Cowboys took Jalen Smith over Miles Jack. I remember that clear as freaking day. It just feels like just historically on the defensive side of the football, especially with the premium assets that they've used, right? Like when they traded up to get Morris Claiborne, that was a whiff. Right. Taco Charlton taking him over TJ Watt was clearly a whiff. Leighton Vander Esch, who I think is a good player, never stays on the field. That's kind of a whiff. Like it's crazy. It really is.
It needs to stop.
Yeah, you know, RJ, we talked about how obviously you never want to root for anyone to fail or get cut, and you always want to see good people succeed. And I'm one of those people. Although I'm not a Cowboy fan, I do genuinely like Dak. He's a good leader. He's performed so far, and I do think he deserved his money. But do you have any reservations about his performance next year, coming back from a really gruesome injury last year?
You know, I love Dak. I mean, I'm with you. Like, I'm Team Dak, pay Dak. I've been there since day one. And so in that sense, you know, it's like, I think that this has gotten to the point of like, because there has been this like pay Dak, you know, drive. I mean, like speaking for myself, I think that like sometimes we can maybe not see flaws. And I don't think that Dak is a flawed quarterback, but like it becomes this like, oh, you don't think he's the greatest quarterback who ever lived? Yeah, you're not Team Dak. It's like, no, like I'm totally Team Dak, but like Aaron Rodgers is better. Like, you know, when the Russell Wilson rumors came out, I wrote about it and I tweeted out that I think Russell Wilson's better today. That's a little debatable, but I got these like tweets that were like, are you kidding me? It's like, no, like I'm not kidding you at all. Russell Wilson is awesome. Like Dak is awesome too. And to that point, I mean, like it's fair to wonder if after a gruesome injury, his play would be impacted. In fact, he said, you know, in his press conference that he would have to operate a little bit differently. That, you know, when the game was on the line, he's still a competitor and he's still going to go for it. He's still going to run for a dive, like whatever the case may be. But he has to be smarter. And that's part of the case now too, right? Because now you're being paid all this money. Like more than ever, your importance to the team is underlined 3 different times, circled and highlighted and everything. But that changes, right? Like if you're not as free willing, you know, that does change your style of play. And maybe Dak evolves and it becomes better and that ultimately works out in of itself. But I think it's fair. I mean, when we were talking a year ago, he had never missed a game due to injury. And that was an incredible thing. And that changed. Like, it sucks, but that did change. And so I think it's fair to have doubts. And I hate to get like super Friday Night Lightsy about it, but like, if there's one dude who I would not bet against, it's Dak Prescott. Cause like, I mean, this is a guy who has overcome like hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. I mean, we're sitting here talking because, I mean, he pulled off one of the more amazing, player contracts in the history of the NFL. And he did it against like Palpatine, right? Like
Right.
in the Dallas Cowboys. Like, he didn't do this, in Jacksonville. Like, he did this at the center of the NFL world.
Right.
He's Rey Skywalker in a lot of senses.
That's a good one. I like that one. Me and Mike have discussed this ad nauseum in regards to the current era of the Dallas Cowboys, the Dak Zeke era. They started together, and for the life of me, RJ, I just feel that there's a cloud over this duo. And I don't know what it is, but there's times where I feel that Zeke has reached his maximum potential of what he's going to be with this organization. And every time we see him in the playoffs, he does not perform. Also, with Dak, there's times where the offense looks extremely flat and they come out uninspired to play football, and they're down 20 points by the time they can blink, and they have to work themselves back. Do you feel that sense that there's some bad luck or some, I don't know, there's some black cat just running across, Dallas Stadium? Like, I don't really know how to kind of put it into words, but there's just something that it doesn't set right with me. And maybe this year might be the last year that we actually see Dak and Zeke together. Like, what are your thoughts about that?
I think that when the era began on this like left foot of sorts, right?
Yeah.
Because, it's supposed to be Tony Romo, they drafted Zeke for Romo, whatever. And I think like every offseason they've had in this era has had some sort of thing. Like
Right.
after 20, so the offseason in 2017, it's Romo officially retires. All right, now we're turning anew. This is going to be the new page, new era, the 2-1-4, whatever. And then Zeke's going to get suspended. The NFL's investigating him. They're going to, find this report. There's lawyers involved. We're all learning all this jargon. And I mean, that goes on forever. And then, okay, that season ends. Boom. Earl Thomas wants to be a Cowboy. All right, cool. What's happening here? Now it's the offseason in 2018. We're dealing with the Earl Thomas thing. They cut Dez. Jason Witten retires. It's all happening all at once. The draft's at AT&T Stadium. Like, what's happening here? And then, okay, we're going to figure this out. We signed Allen Hurns and, brought in Tavon Austin. It's going to be awesome. Drafted Ryan Switzer. Cool. And no, that was the year before even. Goodness gracious. And then, you fast forward a year. Okay, offseason 2019 coming off, trading for Amari Cooper, getting back. We're solid. Let's go. Like, now we're all kind of back believing in Jason Garrett. Everything's going to be fine. Dak needs a new deal. What's going to happen here? Jared Goff gets his deal. Carson Wentz gets his deal. Russell Wilson gets a new deal. And then it becomes this like, well, man, the Cowboys start off 3-0. Like, everything's good. Everything's awesome. And then they lose to the Jets and like implosion happens and everything. And then last offseason, it's okay, are they going to pay him? Because now the rookie contract's really over. Zeke's starting to regress. You've moved on from Jason Garrett. You brought in Mike McCarthy. I thought something that would have been fascinating and didn't happen, obviously, is at the Super Bowl last year, Dak said that he was considering holding out of mini camps and OTAs. And that would have been fascinating. I mean, if in Mike McCarthy's first moments with the Cowboys, Dak Prescott hadn't been there, but obviously none of them ended up happening. And so now you're dealing with all that and all this, everything's changing and the NFL salary cap is shrinking and there's not going to be any fans in attendance. And then he gets hurt. And so like, it has been this like constant, like, dance of trying to get on beat, you know what I mean? And it feels like the music finally stopped and we can all go, like get a drink of water, like dry our face off and come back and finally start, the era. In some senses, like they feel like they're adults now. Like they were these kids and these, kids kind of running the show, but now they're experienced. Now they know life as Dallas Cowboys. They've, been through hard losses. They've been through controversies. They've been through coaching changes. They've experienced the whole run of being a part of America's team. And so now it feels like they're mature enough, not that they weren't before, but mature enough in NFL-ness to kind of take on what this team truly commands.
How long you been covering the Cowboys, RJ?
I have been blogging, on things regarding the Cowboys since 2015. So it's been interesting things basically ever since.
How'd that happen?
Well, when I went to college, I thought I would be an engineer, which is why I went to Texas A&M. My dad's an engineer, and so I think when you're that young, you don't know what to do. It's like you just look to somebody and say, "I'll do that." And so I loved Texas A&M, and it is a special place, as a lot of people will say in jokes and stuff. And I reached a point where I just didn't want to do that, and it was the summer, or it was the fall of 2012. And I'm an only child, and at the time my parents were divorced, and I was like the center of both of their worlds, and which is a great thing, but kind of an intimidating thing.
Right.
And I just kind of told them, I said, look, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. Like, I know that that's a hard thing to hear, and thankfully they were both really supportive of me. And I'm from the Rio Grande Valley, which is the southern tip of Texas, and so they said, well, what do you want to do? And I have no idea. I know I love the Cowboys, and I know a lot of people say this. I was always the person that talked about the Cowboys, followed the Cowboys, whatever you want to call it. And I think I got to move to Dallas. And my dad said at the time, he said, well, that's really far. Why don't you move to San Antonio and just kind of figure it out? And so kind of on a whim, I moved to San Antonio, and I got a job at the time at Dallas Cowboys Pro Shop. And for anybody who doesn't know, those exist in malls all over the state. They're like, it's a retail store that's 100% Dallas Cowboys merchandise.
Yep.
And I thought like, oh, this is a foot in the door, and that was a really kind of naive thought. But I met my wife now, but I met her working there, which ultimately was a good thing, obviously, and learned a lot kind of about corporate America in that sense, and kind of about having a job. I mean, it was a part-time job, but it really did teach me a lot. And we opened a new store, and in opening the store, we had ESPN San Antonio come out for 2 days and just kind of do some publicity near the store. And so I just kind of got friendly with the co-host of that show. His name's Jason Minix, and we just kind of hit it off, and we kind of just became friends. And because I knew Jason, I followed the station on Twitter, and in 2016. The kind of fall of 2016, about August, I saw that ESPN San Antonio was having a Rock the Mic competition, which at the time I'd already started kind of blogging on the side about the Cowboys because I couldn't take it anymore. I knew I had to start doing something. And so I saw this Rock the Mic competition. I'd also been podcasting a little bit and trying to just find my way and trying to tweet and get to know people and stuff. Yeah. And so I went to this competition because I knew Jason, and it was just kind of, 1 minute, give us your take. And so I talked about the Cowboys, and, we had to get some votes. And because I developed a little bit of an online presence, I was able to kind of round up the troops and get that help. And went through all the processes. There were several rounds, and thank God I won. And that really opened a lot of doors for me. That was 2016, and I was their Cowboys guy. And that was a really, this is a, divine intervention is really prominent in my life, I believe. The Cowboys were really successful, and they needed a guy. They had 2 local shows at the time. So they, I know that this is a constant debate, and I wouldn't, everybody has, what's right for them, but they needed somebody to come in, and they couldn't pay me anything. And I was fortunate that I could afford that at the time. And so I would go host different shows with them, get to interview different people. They had Jason Garrett on every Monday, so I would get to talk to Jason Garrett if I was there. And just kind of learn from them and develop myself. And people talk so much about how you need reps and reps and reps, and got reps. And that season, that 2016 season, the Super Bowl was in Houston. And so they told me, they said, look, we can't pay for you to come. But if you can get to Houston, if you can find a place to stay, we can use you there on Radio Row. And so, I have some family in Houston. It was a 3-hour drive. So I drove. Got my first taste of, working at a Super Bowl, getting guests, booking guests. They let me interview a couple of people. I interviewed Kirk Cousins. And so, I'm so fortunate, so grateful to them. They gave me the opportunities that they did. And that just kind of, I kept asking for more and saying yes to things. They needed somebody to run stats during high school football on Friday nights. And so I did that. Later, they asked me to call the high school football game. So I did that. Later they asked, if I want to do, I kind of asked this about myself, but I got a Saturday morning show, So we'd go in every Saturday and for 2 hours, and that show's still going. And I'm really proud of the work I've done there in the past. But in 2018, I'd already been, writing for Blogging the Boys. I had just wanted a bigger platform from the blog I was at before that. And so I found out they were hiring a full-time person to run the site and run the podcast, YouTube channel, kind of grow the brand. And I applied, and thankfully, thank God, I was chosen. And so since June 25th, 2018, I've been in this role, and we've done so much. And I've just so enjoyed working at SB Nation and everything that they've offered me, and even other opportunities that we've had there. I mean, this past season, we started a different podcast, the SB Nation NFL Show, which covers the league as a whole. And so I co-host 2 shows there. And so I really am so blessed, and I've been fortunate to have so many wonderful opportunities and so many different people come into my life, and a supportive wife and a supportive set of parents. And that was, I know I've kind of rambled here, but
no, not at all.
At the end of not the end, but in the fall of 2018, my dad was talking to me one night, and we were on the phone, and he asked me how we weren't married at the time, and my now wife and I would feel about going to Israel that summer. And I said, well, that'd be awesome, and I said, that's mom's like dream vacation, right? And he said, well, yeah, she's going too. And I was just kind of like the 4 of us, and he was like, yeah, and like I was the weird one. And I was like just the 4 of us, and so that was kind of their way of telling me they were seeing each other again. My wife and I got married. We recently celebrated 2 years of marriage this past week. My parents got remarried. Thank you. My parents got remarried on June 1st, 2019.
Wow.
And so at the time, my wife and I were still living in San Antonio, but last year, kind of about this time, a little bit into the pandemic, we had made a trip down to the valley where my parents live, in our old house together, and we'd kind of been making trips and stuff and saying, why are we doing this? Like, there's nothing tying us to San Antonio. So in July of last year, we moved, and now we live in the same neighborhood as my parents. I get to play golf with my dad, a couple times a week. And so I really, truly am so blessed, and I love my job. And I just, covering the Cowboys, I got, it all kind of goes back to that pro shop job. I was looking for a flag for my apartment, a Cowboys flag. And so if I hadn't been looking for a flag, I don't know what life would have thrown at me.
You're right. You're darn right about that. Divine intervention, man. I'm telling you, that's cool stuff. That's really cool stuff.
It's awesome, RJ. Super. Congratulations on everything. Obviously, you've accomplished so much, and it's really very inspiring to people like myself, because I'm going to college right now and graduating in May for journalism. And to me, like, the apex of doing what you love is, for me particularly, is being able to cover a team or a sport that you've been a fan of your entire life, to watch yourself grow from a fan into whatever, an analyst or just a journalism or a reporter or someone being involved with that team. To me, that's like the ultimate dream. And then you kind of being the embodiment of that is just a true inspiration to people like myself. So have you kind of taken a moment to step back and just realize where you are and kind of take it all in? Say like, wow, I was just working in a Cowboys pro shop not too long ago, and now I'm the editor-in-chief of Blogging the Boys. I got my radio show and everything. Do you ever just kind of, have that moment to think?
The editor-in-chief of a site that's got 100,000 Twitter followers.
Exactly.
I mean, I appreciate that very much, Matt, and I think about that a lot. And God is the main part of my life, and I know that people have different views on religion, and so I can only speak for myself. But I'm so grateful to the blessings that God has given me, and I consider them a responsibility. And this year, I've been reading a portion of the Bible every day, and it's my goal to read the entire Bible in 2021. And so, my wife and I are both very devout in our faith together, and I believe that that's something that we both believe needs to be at the center of our household. And so, I continually, give thanks to God, and I attribute whatever success I've had to Him. And I attribute it, as well to my wife and to my parents, because there were times that, I needed help to pay rent, or I needed help to do this. And like I said, I know that that's a conversation that has been around a lot, but I was very fortunate and very blessed that I was in that opportunity. I know other people don't have those blessings in their lives or those opportunities, but it is amazing. And I do believe in hard work, and I believe in hustling, and you guys are all hustling and really, doing your own thing. And I think that, that's a really, we live in such troubling and turbulent times, but it is, like, I say this often on our different networks, but like, it is the sickest thing in the world that like the four of us can sit here in wherever we are in the world and talk about football. Like, that is the coolest thing in the world. And we can agree, we can disagree, like, and then we can tweet about it and we can talk about it. And like, you can go on like PS5 later, like, and talk about it there. And sure, like, it is so cool that like we have these levels of accessible. Like, I hate to be like, technology is awesome, but it really is amazing. Like the time we live in, that is a possibility. And I know that, there's a lot going on in the world, but I admire you I wish I was that forward thinking when I was in college. I really do. And so I think you're well on the right path.
Thank you.
Don't give him so much credit, RJ. Don't give him so much credit.
His head's gonna blow up like a balloon.
We're gonna have to hear about it later, man. So let's talk some general NFL stuff, right? So the other team in Texas has some issues, has some big issues. What do you think the conclusion is to that soap opera over there? Do you think the Texans will actually pick up the phone at some point? Because, Deshaun Watson has been very, very consistent in regards to how he feels. He doesn't want to play for David Culley. They have a nice staff over there that they've put together. He doesn't want to give them a second chance, even a year to figure it out. So at some point, do you think that the Texans have to really play ball here and do something?
I mean, I think that if they're going to trade Deshaun Watson, now is the time. That's the realization they have to come to. And I certainly understand not wanting to or refusing to. But I mean, like, think about like every aspect of life we will have to live between now and this moment a year from now. Right. Like, we will, like, the Masters will happen in April, then like the NBA playoffs, then like the Little League World Series if it happens, then like the Olympics and a whole football season and Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's and Valentine's. Like, that's a lot of time. And like, that's a lot of time to deal with like everyone dumping on you and hating on you and saying you have no idea what you're doing. And that's a long time if Deshaun Watson is serious, and by all accounts, it does seem like he is, to go on hating you. And it's a matter of time before we get the, like, ESPN, the magazine, GQ sit down with Deshaun, where he like details, like, that's the next wave. Like, he airs out some sort of dirty laundry. And I'm not at all casting doubt on Deshaun Watson's story, but like, whatever Deshaun says may or may not be true. But like, the whole world is in agreement that Deshaun Watson is right because of the narrative surrounding the Texans. Yeah. And so he's going to come out and say whatever. And then like, he is only, you can only, like, they probably think they can't sink any lower. Like, that is so not true. Like, you can sink so much lower right now. And like, you've got to do it. Like, when you're sick and you like sweat out the infection one night, like, you got to have that night. Like, you got to sweat it out. You got to trade him. And the sooner you get that done, the sooner everyone will have the memes and the jokes, and you'll be the disgrace or whatever. But all that time will happen, and people will forget about it slowly.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. This offseason is going to be it's going to be an interesting one. I remember Diana Rossini saying that she talked to some anonymous GM in the NFL, and they said it's going to be an absolute massacre. Like, you're going to see guys get cut that you would never imagine get cut and all of those things. So a couple of things that have happened since we've been talking. The Bills re-signed Matt Milano on a 4-year deal. Their linebacker. The Texans have signed Mark Ingram on a 1-year deal.
Okay.
So again, none of them are drastically big moves, but in your mind, RJ, do you think that there's is there one big move that you're expecting to happen before the season starts?
I mean, I'll say something other than Deshaun, because that would be super boring. But one of the shows I host on the SB Nation NFL show, I co-host with a buddy of mine, Rob Stats Guerrero. He's a big 49ers fan, and he is trying to will the Seahawks trading Russell Wilson into existence. And it's really nice, as like I said earlier, as a Cowboys fan, to just like enjoy that now, right? Like trade him wherever you want. Like who cares at this point? I thought once upon a time that Russell would end up as a Giant. Like that would be honestly kind of interesting too. I don't want that, but it would be interesting. I grow more confident that that's going to happen. I think he might be just as upset as Deshaun. Maybe
I'm with you. I agree.
Yeah, maybe he doesn't have as much justification. Like the Seahawks don't have a Jack Easterby like ruining the culture of the organization, but he does seem to be that upset. And Russell is also at a evolved point of his career where he's ready. Like I completely believe that he wants to be the center of attention and wants to be the star, wants to be the MVP. And like I believe he and his wife, who's very successful as well, want to get to a bigger market than Seattle. And so I think the Cowboys offered that. I think Las Vegas offers that. I don't know that I think New Orleans offers that, but I grow more excited about the idea of Russell in Chicago. My dog's name is Bear, and so he kind of has a soft spot for that team. So it'd be cool to see them just have some success. But what's more is like Russell wants to be like an immortal legend. And we talked about path of least resistance earlier. The path of least resistance to getting a statue is shortest for Russell Wilson in Chicago than it is anywhere else, given that franchise's history with quarterbacks.
Right.
Yeah, because if he gets traded, he's automatically the best quarterback in franchise history.
Right.
Yeah.
RJ, we were talking about all these different offseason moves, but one of them that I found could be the most beneficial or boomer bust type thing was Carson Wentz getting traded to Indianapolis. So I'm very curious, from a Dallas Cowboys perspective, what was your immediate reaction to that trade?
Well, we couldn't have as many laughs as we wanted to because the Dak thing wasn't squared away. So that's my only regret about it. I wish that that had been taken care of so we could have properly, enjoyed it. But I mean, it makes sense that they needed a breakup of sorts. Like that, GQ article's on its way too. Like, discussing the Eagles, or like we already kind of got it. I think it was the Philly Inquirer that wrote about the Carson Wentz poster in Howie Roseman's office or whatever. But I like Carson Wentz a lot. Like I like him as a player, and it is cool. Like I like Odell Beckham Jr. And it's cool when those players leave teams you don't like so that you can like freely root for them. And so I am really rooting for the Colts. I think it would be hilarious if Carson was awesome, just to kind of show the brokenness in Philadelphia. Right. But like I also think like, and not to make it about Dak, but people are so like hesitant, right? Like, well, what if the quarterback we're going to pay all this money sucks? Well, like Carson Wentz just sucked a lot, like more than anybody. And the Colts, who are an extremely competent front office, gave up draft capital for the right to absorb his supremely overinflated contract. And so like that to me, like is another, it also proved that like, don't be afraid to hand out these big deals, because no matter what, I mean, you can find a way out of it. But that was a really, really weird era in the Philadelphia Eagles. And I feel for Carson. I mean, he was in a super awkward spot there from the moment they won the Super Bowl. And I think for the most part, he handled it with class. But I think that like the culture of that fan base just kind of got to him.
Real soft spot bringing up Odell there. It was unnecessary.
I think it's going to work in Indy, man. I do. I think Carson Wentz is going to work in Indianapolis. Okay. Go ahead, Barry.
Nobody's a bigger Carson Wentz mark than my friend Mike Guido over here. He will fight you to the death in regards to his Carson Wentz take.
He never lets it go. I like Carson Wentz.
You're a Cowboys fan. You should have more dignity than that. Okay.
It's not against the rules, Barry. Okay. We ask this to everybody that we interview before we let you go, RJ. And there is no wrong answer because we've gotten many different ones. And I mean, we've gotten one repeat answer the whole time we've been doing this. Who is the greatest athlete of all time in any sport?
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I mean, and this is my own personal favorite athlete that I've watched like my life is Tony Romo. Like I watched Tony Romo at a really impressionable age, and really, he helped mold like my love for football. So I have a soft spot for him in that sense. Like I think you've probably gotten like Michael Jordan a lot, but I don't even know that I think like again,
twice.
not to doubt like a GOAT, but like I don't know that I think he was like the greatest athlete, like in terms of just like God-given ability. Man, this is tough. Like Michael Phelps is up there, like in terms of worldwide accolades. I'm gonna go with Ronaldo. Like
Okay.
again, like
Oh,
if we're talking
I like
about
it.
like just like human athleticism and like the natural talent within their bodies, I'm gonna go with Ronaldo.
That's
Cristiano
nice.
Ronaldo. You are
That's
the
a good one.
first Cristiano Ronaldo.
that's a good one.
That makes me feel really good. I'm really happy to. I don't want to be like a copycat by any means, but yeah, that feels. I mean, because like again, MJ like had the greatest will or drive, whatever you want to call it, and like again,
Right.
not doubting him at all. But like Ronaldo looks like he was built in a lab, and like there are very few dudes that look like that. So
Listen,
I'll
you win Martin Gramatica, man. Martin Gramatica had Diego Maradona as his answer. So, you know.
Oh, dude. Well, that makes sense too. Like given his, his
Yeah.
ancestry and whatnot. So that's awesome. I like that. And I think I saw they're making a Netflix series about Maradona's life. So I'm all
Yeah.
in on that too.
Yeah.
So let me just, before we let you go, RJ, let me read you the names that we've gotten before that. So we got Diego Maradona, we got Muhammad Ali,
That's fair.
we got Randy Moss, we got Peyton Manning, we got Edwin Moses, we've gotten Floyd Mayweather, and we got Michael Jordan twice, and now we have Cristiano Ronaldo. You notice who's not on that list?
Dak Prescott.
Tom Brady.
But
We
see,
have
like
not gotten a Tom Brady yet.
I don't know who gave you Peyton, but like that answer sucks. Like I mean, and Tom would Tom would suck because like they're these incredible athletes, but they're not like these great athletes. Like
Mhm.
like I mean, like Phil Mickelson is an incredible athlete, but he's not like a athletic athlete. You know what I mean? Like, and so
It's like voting for John Daly.
yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, I like and even Tiger. Like Tiger's less of an athlete than like Brooks Koepka. You know what I mean? But he's just a better athlete. I mean,
Yeah.
so that's like wow. Someone's gonna give you Tom though. Like eventually, I believe in
it's
that.
coming. It's
Someone's
coming.
gonna take the bait.
It's coming. They're gonna definitely give you that default answer. That's a default answer to me. MJ and Brady are default answers.
Right.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten LeBron James either, which I'm really surprised about.
Which-
Also,
That would work though.
That I'm
Like,
shocked about.
Which I'm very
That would
upset
work.
about. Yes.
Yeah, because that dude's a monster too. Like again, it should be somebody who doesn't. The rule should be they should never have to wear a shirt. I think like or like Serena is a great example too. Like
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
somebody's got to give you Serena too.
Definitely. If
yeah, but
we
she's
don't
got to
get
wear a shirt. That's the problem.
if we
Right.
don't get a LeBron, if we don't get a LeBron or a Serena, we definitely gonna have to change up the rules. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, RJ, listen, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you for coming on the show. This was fun. You can tell everybody what you got going on and what's in store.
Sure. Well, now that Dak Watch is over, we're all happy. We're all excited. Peace has been restored. And so we're just looking forward to free agency. So, I mean, we put out a number of articles every day at bloggingtheboys.com. Our podcast, you can search for Blog on the Boys wherever you get your podcast. We put out a different show every day, different people, different hosts, giving you different perspectives. Our YouTube channel's been bumping as of late. We do some live streams and we do some film reviews and stuff like that. So with free agency and the draft coming up, we're going to be busy. I'm looking forward to, hopefully a dead point in the offseason now that all the controversies are behind the Cowboys, where we can all just kind of sit back and enjoy. But I really appreciate you guys having me on and appreciate the conversation. It was a good time. And I'm glad I was the first person to take Cristiano.
Definitely, man. It's been our pleasure, man. Well, that wraps it up for All Even Live exclusive. I am Barry Grant Jr., host of the All Even podcast. To my left is Mike Guido, host of Guido's Gridiron Blitz. We got the great Matt Cataruzolo down the bottom, and we had RJ Ochoa on the show, and it's been a pleasure, man. So until next week, we'll see you then.